Hi. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see everyone here. There's nothing like danger to bring people out. And of course, the solar industry is always in danger. I've been leading MC now for close to 27 years, and I don't think a month has gone by without a crisis. So we only do conferences for the big ones, and this is a big one. We identified grid modernization and interconnection as our #1 issue 2 years ago, and it's only gotten stronger and stronger as an issue. It's massive. And of course, it's easy to understand that when you're transforming one of the most fundamental aspects of a civilization, which is how they utilize energy, it's going to get complicated, and it sure does. And there's going to be fights and disagreements, and there are. But grid modernization, it seems like everyone is in agreement now that it's a very high priority and a very difficult task to handle, and I believe it will be for years to come. So I'm thrilled and pleased to introduce our first speaker, who is Paul Heitmann, who is in charge of grid modernization at the Board of Public Utilities. And I have to say, we complain about the BPU once in a while, but we've had nothing but praise of the work that Paul and the other staff at the BPU has been doing. They've been putting together a grid modernization order, a new interconnect order, that I believe, and I'm talking to people all over the country weekly, I believe that New Jersey is going to lead the country in terms of grid modernization with its innovation and forward thinking. So I've got one last issue. Oh, no, I don't. Okay, I didn't know if it was up on the screen, but I'll bring up Paul.
I like the term in charge, but it might be a little strong. But I'm leading and influencing the proceeding that we have. It is a formal proceeding. So we're in the second year of the work we're trying to do, which, as you'll see, we've sort of defined how we're doing it in a near term and a longer term. There's lots of moving parts, lots of facets to this, a lot of impacted areas, technical, financial, etc. So we are making progress. And one thing I wanted to start with was that, everybody thinks, hey, if we can interconnect to, then we're good, right? And that's true. But the real value in distributed energy is the operation and the interaction with the grid. So that's why I added operation within. And, I'm calling this one our virtual edition of the presentation. So the concepts remain the same, and these are sort of the 4 attributes we're using, have used, and will use. We want strong engagement and awareness with the people that are ultimately purchasing and installing and hosting the distributed energy. We have to move incrementally, but not too slowly, because time is of the essence. And we have strong goals in New Jersey to reach for clean energy adoption. We also have to stay real in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. There are a lot of laws that were on the books for many, many years that were designed in a different era while technology is marching forward. So we want to be realistic about how we proceed. And then really, probably last but first, is we want this to be a collaborative thing. Everybody says, oh, we have stakeholders, we have, sessions people can contribute. But we really have tried to walk the talk on that. Though many of you have been in some of our stakeholder meetings we've done virtually. And there was a lot of good input on that. So the idea is, let's take customers, let's increment that change, let's stay real on barriers, but not just accept them as immutable. And also collaborate on the approach. So the way we've done that from an engaging standpoint is recognize that the customer is the center of all this. I think everybody here would say that too, that it's customer driven. The idea of the customer is making these changes, they're running these changes, and there's other players that are involved too. We've got to recognize the municipality has authority for permitting, the utility has the main focus, immediate focus is the interconnection. But there's also the idea of once this is operational again, we're going to have some really powerful data that is at the grid edge that we haven't had before. We're in the process of deploying AMI in New Jersey with all the EDCs, various stages. And ultimately that will allow this virtualization of bringing all these together, and when the age of the aggregator comes to really use those and incorporate many of these, you'll see the real power of that opening up. But you've got to have interconnection first to do that. With that in mind, that's where we want to go. So we said incrementally we want to recognize the current conditions that we've got. I think everybody here would agree that there are hosting constraints. So we're calling it DER hosting capacity is sort of the watchword for this. In the process, there's inefficiencies along the queue of jumping in and managing it. There are delays and dropouts, some legitimate, but some of those maybe shouldn't even have been in the queue to begin with. If there was more information up front, they would have said, hey, let's look for a different area, and there could be a collaboration on finding better areas to put these things. There's large cost barriers for individual projects. You're seeing this at the PJM level with transmission level interconnection. To just be able to connect is overwhelming, and how do you spread and manage that cost? So we're looking at ways to do this. These are longer term. You can imagine the complexity and the impact. We have to deal with this longer term. In large part, it's inequitable economic and environmental factors, where facilities are sited, who even gets to participate, how people can really participate in that distributed grid. And in general, there's the idea of non-standard projects. Everything is bespoke. Everything is, when you can standardize a lot of the elements in that, you can let things flow together and assemble and stack up, as we'll see later on, when we talk about these aggregations. So that's probably too small to see, but just safe to say that taking this incrementally, but not over a long time frame, we want to start with a philosophy of that there's a customer awareness, that there are an increasing amount of smart devices, and increasingly they're becoming interoperable. It's a reasonable cost to put these technologies in. There's some mechanism of compensating the performance, the operational performance of the DER, along with incentives to initially put them in, up front. Really, we're presupposing that we have quality M&V, measurement and verification data, because without that, you're flying blind. You don't understand what the impact is and how things are being impacted in the operation of the grid, which we all want a reliable grid. But there's capacity, hosting capacity in there that could allow it to host more, we think. And the idea of moving to these standards from interfaces and protocols. So the immediate action that we're taking, and immediate's a relative term because, as Lyle said, it's been 2 years since this is a focus, but we are moving forward. We'll talk a little bit about the rules, and those are really focusing about reducing application processing time, making sure that there's some degree of uniform presentation of hosting capacity when projects look to connect. They're able to see in a standard, uniform way and make some decisions. The ones that have the opportunity to move to a different area, maybe a different service company, if it's consistent across the state. That was the thought on that. We want to start towards proactive planning of the distribution grid. That's easier said than done. Other states have put in place some of these integrated plans, and that's one of the things we're lining up with and doing a work group on. Talk about that later. And what we can do in the meantime, and we have done, those of you who have seen the public documents and feedback, is opening up the screening limits and criteria, and also introduce export limiting as an ability for projects to commit to. Because if you can do that, it's verified and accepted, limit the export, there's a lot of extra room and flexibility that gives the EDC. And we also added what's called a PAVE process, to talk about that one, pre-application verification. So ultimately, what we want to do is in the long term, the real impact comes from creating what I've been calling a grid flexibility services model that's market driven. We're able to take the cost of interconnection, spread it over to recognize the benefits of these flexibility services across large populations, as well as the developer and the community that it's located in. We want to maximize the grid hosting capacity, ultimately, not necessarily just by putting bigger poles and wires up, because that's expensive, but where we need to, we should do it. But it should be done intelligently on the part of that proactive planning. There's a big move to drive increased energy storage. I think everybody here has seen the idea of solar and storage. It's almost like peanut butter and jelly now. So where you put solar, you put storage. And that's only going to grow. And hopefully the costs of storage, and they've resumed coming back down again. So hopefully that will continue. And then, we're moving in this aggregation world to this FERC Order 2222, where the EDCs should ideally have a standard way for aggregators to come in and utilize and group all those together and have them operate. Lots of moving parts. And ultimately, if you saw, a couple of weeks ago, I guess Governor Murphy had announced a partnership with Princeton University on AI. This whole area is ripe for AI, putting the AI technology in place. So the vision is this is where we want to get to the grid. Highly cost-effective upgrades. We invest where we need to, but can do the maximum absorption and hosting capacity. Ultimately, we're going to be opening up economic engines that are driven by DER development and operation at the edge, inviting a lot of participation, having a strong community energy bent, not necessarily community solar, but the resilience that you get from having solar in a community and having access to that. And then moving away from just sort of one lump sum capital investment to market mechanisms that promote more and more adoption of that. With risk mitigated private funding and public funding, and really leading to this flexible distribution grid operation. So that's sort of the setup. The realism comes from there's a lot of actors that each have their own business models and interests. And what we tried to do was seed these ideas, these philosophies, align as much as we could, and build a consensus around that before we just mandated, here it is, thou shalt. And largely we've succeeded. I think we've got a lot of good collaboratively agreed things, recognizing that some of them need more negotiation, isolation of issues, escalation, and ultimately this is going to feed into the continued collaboration. So you recognize this from my earlier stakeholder meetings. With the one addition, this was sort of the group of folks we brought together, the experts, along with this public collaboration. And by design, we recognized that there were barriers that we needed to break through. And we did. We had a lot of, and all this is recorded and accessible on site. The docket number, for those of you that haven't seen it, if you go to cleanenergy.com GridMod, at the bottom of that page, there's a link to the docket number with all the docket items that have been filed. So what this did was it split with the board order that was at the end of 2022 into the near-term ones that, look, we're good on this, let's get this codified, let's put this into rules, and these longer-term ones. And how we're approaching that is to take the near-term ones and put them in a rules document, which we've issued a straw, received comments, and have incorporated, and finalizing that. And those are the low-hanging fruits of, streamlining the process, giving some early indications through the PAVE process for larger ones. It's greater than 500 kilowatts. And then these more difficult ones, we're going to do those through what we call the GridMod Forum, which is a series of initially 5 working groups, 2 of which we're going to start right away. But ultimately, those have to resolve through rules, the same mechanism. So very strong recommendations, but ultimately the BPU has to create the rules and put them in place. But a nice side benefit of this is we're going to have some really great working group experts that can feed into this upcoming energy master plan. So if things work well, we're going to be going that way. So these are the existing, this is the green one, the near-term rules. These are the sections that we've had. We've added definitions, we've improved the thresholds, as I said, for some of these, for the general application to all sizes. We've modified some of the interconnection application processes, which is the level 1, level 2, and level 3. Particularly level 3, the larger ones didn't have a lot of good definition, so we've added a lot of definition to that. We've added fees for level 1, which weren't there before, nominal fees, just to, it was the right way to do it, that people in the queue managed. And then we've, some minor updating on the testing and inspection and reporting. And then we've added new sections, which is the pre-application verification, which gives the developer the right, and the EDC the obligation to, on request, provide more detailed, specific information about their distribution system. The thinking there is those teams with the larger size solar are going to have the capacity to understand that, and they'll be able to make better informed decisions. Should we go forward with this on this circuit, and get the utilities, in a much tighter upfront collaboration to decide, is that right? Should we go somewhere else? The idea of defining hosting capacity in a more consistent way was in our section 11. We initially had put the requirement to have a proactive system update plan for the utilities, but we felt that really, in the iteration of that really was too soon. So we just took that out. We deferred to a work group on that. That's one of our immediate work groups, is to have this integrated DER plan. And then lastly, we put a dispute resolution in place. How am I looking? 5 more minutes? 2 more minutes, okay. 3 more minutes. Do I hear 4? Okay. So here are the initial work groups. The ones we're immediately focusing on are, and these are by recommendations in the Guidehouse report. Number 8 is that the EDC should submit integrated DER and integrated distribution plans. So that is basically going to be developing the hosting capacity roadmap. So the work group is going, along with the utilities, who are part of that work group, is going to be defining proactive submission and filing of these plans. Here's how we intend to drive hosting capacity. Here's how we see these circuits. So that's going to get into a lot of complex areas. It's going to require some confidential information. There's non-disclosure. That's why it's taking a little bit long, but we're going to get there. And that's going to be a very productive work group. We also have Lawrence Berkeley Labs helping us on that, and some other national experts with that. And then the other one that we're going to move right away on is recommendation 5. Kind of the short code for that is, why can't you just adopt California Rule 21? Well, nobody wants to just do that wholesale. But there's a lot of good things in that rule that are driving towards flexible services and flexible interconnection, based on this intelligent adjusting of demand and having resources there, DER resources. So we're labeling that the Grid Flexibility Services Work Group, and the ultimate goal for that will be to really explore different ways of using the operation, not just the connection, but the operation of DER, so it's a productive use, and it actually just drives more and more and more hosting capacity. So that was our first 2. And I think with that, this is just sort of how we're approaching this. The work groups are, being formed by, we were advised by Guidehouse of what the right balance and mix was, so we're picking the real experts, industry experts, along with the EDCs, to be in those work groups, and the BPU is heavily involved with that. And then we are going to be basically developing information, through R&D. This is all sort of on our SharePoint site. It's not the public site, but we're going to be having open and closed work group meetings. We'll be collecting that. We'll be moving that forward. Part of this is we're going to be featuring an innovation pilot. We had called that a regulatory sandbox. Nobody really liked that term, but everybody agreed we want to do things fast and learn fast, and we're letting the work groups define what we need to test, and then implementing those, and then collecting that information. And then, we will have channels coming out, information to the public, events like this on panels, and then, as I mentioned, that's going to feed into the rules, what I call Rules 2, which is the update on that. So, if I can leave you with one more, this is just a concept, thought experiment. A traditional demand response program has sort of a utility control over hot water heater and AC, etc. And those are dedicated, one-time investment, and they do one thing, they shed peak load. But what if we tied in with the PJM market through these grid flexibility services, and DR became one of many tools to use collectively? And then what if we did that and just floated that back into a virtual aggregation? I mean, this is a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts, but you can imagine the power that this would unleash for a world of DER.